Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever wondered how a tiny little question, just an idea, can actually grow into a massive, groundbreaking discovery? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that entire research journey. We are walking through every single step, from that first aha moment all the way to the final analysis. So, if you're studying anthropological inquiry, maybe prepping for an exam, this is exactly what you need.
Okay, let's dive right in. The best way to start is to think about research as having two totally different ways of seeing the world. First, you've got qualitative research. This is like looking through a microscope. You're zooming in, you're getting all the rich, juicy details, and you're really trying to understand the why behind something. Then, on the other hand, you have quantitative research. This is more like using a wide-angle lens. You're stepping back to see the big picture, using numbers and stats to find broad patterns. It's all about the how many.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the blueprint, which is all about designing your research. Then we'll grab our moral compass to look at the ethical foundations. After that, it's time for the exploration phase, collecting the data. And we'll wrap it all up with the discovery, where we analyze what we found. Let's get to it.
All right, part one, the blueprint. You can't build a house without a plan, and you definitely can't do research for that one either. This is where we lay all the groundwork.
So what is a research design, really? Well, think of it as the master plan, the architectural blueprint for your whole project. It's not just a to-do list. It literally guides every single decision you're going to make, making sure you stay on track to actually answer your big research question.
And this lays out the entire story of a research project step by step. It all kicks off with a problem, right? Some question that you just can't shake. So you dive into the literature to see what other people have already figured out. That helps you form a hypothesis, your best educated guess. Then you pick your tools, your methodology, and you head out into the world to do your fieldwork. And finally, you take everything you gathered, analyze it, and write it all up to tell the world what you discovered.
Okay, let's talk about something that sits at the heart of this entire process, your ethical compass. And listen, this isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's an absolute must for any researcher who wants to do their work responsibly. Now, at the core of ethics, you basically find these two big competing ideas. First, there's consequentialism. The motto here is basically, the end justifies the means. If the outcome is good for a lot of people, then the action was right. But the deontological view, it just flips that whole idea on its head. It says, nope, some things are just wrong, period. Lying to someone, harming them, it doesn't matter how good the results might be. Human rights are absolute.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. This timeline shows the horrifying real-world cost of getting ethics wrong. For 40 years, the Tuskegee syphilis study allowed researchers to watch hundreds of African-American men suffer and die from a treatable disease, all in the name of science. The public outrage when this story finally broke was immense, and it led directly to the strict ethical rules that we have today to protect people.
That outrage gave us the Belmont Report, a true landmark document and something you absolutely need to know. It boils everything down to three key principles. First, respect for persons. You have to treat people as autonomous individuals. Second, beneficence. This is the do no harm rule. In fact, you should try to maximize benefits. And third, justice. Who bears the risks of research and who gets the benefits? It has to be fair.
So those big principles translate into 4 pillars of ethical practice. These are non-negotiable. You've got informed consent. People have to know exactly what they're getting into. Anonymity, where not even the researcher knows who provided the data. Then there's confidentiality, where the researcher knows but promises to protect the participant's identity. And finally, you have to avoid deception. These 4 pillars are the bedrock of trustworthy research.
Okay, our blueprint is drawn, our ethical compass is set. Now it's time for the adventure to begin. This is the exploration phase where we actually head out and start collecting our data.
Every researcher has this amazing toolkit of methods they can use, and this table gives you a great overview. For instance, if you want to understand the rhythm of daily life somewhere, you'd use observation. If you need to trace a family's history and kinship, you'd use the genealogical method. And for a super deep dive on a single complex issue, you'd do a case study. It's all about picking the right tool for the job.
Now, one of the most common tools you'll see, especially for gathering quantitative data, is the good old questionnaire. It's just a set of questions, usually with preset answers, that people fill out on their own. And because everyone is answering the exact same questions, it's a super efficient way to get a ton of data from a lot of people really quickly. But if a questionnaire is like a multiple-choice test, an interview is like a deep, meaningful conversation.
It's this dynamic back and forth where the researcher can really dig in, ask follow-up questions, and get to the why behind an answer. This is where you find the rich stories that numbers alone just can't tell you.
And this slide right here is perfect because it puts them head to head. It's a classic contrast you'll want to remember. Questionnaires are rigid. They give you the hard numbers, the what. Interviews are flexible. They give you the context, the meaning, the why. Knowing when to use each of these is absolutely key.
So, the fieldwork is done. We've collected everything, but the journey's not over yet. Now, we get to the final and maybe most exciting part, the discovery. This is where we make sense of it all.
You know, a really great way to think about analysis is with Bernard's data and analysis matrix. It shows us that it's not as simple as using quantitative methods for numbers and qualitative for words. You can get really creative. For example, you can do a qualitative analysis of quantitative data. You could look at survey results and interpret what those numbers mean in the real world. This matrix just opens up a whole world of possibilities.
So let's say we have a mountain of quantitative data. Where do we even begin? Well, the first step is always descriptive statistics. Think of it like getting the lay of the land. We use measures of central tendency, that's your mean, median, and mode, to find the center of the data. And then we use measures of dispersion, like range and standard deviation, to see how spread out everything is. It's our first essential snapshot.
Okay, but here's the million-dollar question. It's great that we can describe our little sample of, say, 100 people. But what we really want to do is make claims about the entire population, right? So how do we jump from our small group to the whole country? How can we be confident that what we found isn't just a fluke?
And that is where inferential statistics come to the rescue. They are the magic bridge that lets us make that leap from our sample to the wider population. Powerful tools like the t-test or the chi-square test act like a filter for our data. They help us figure out if the patterns we're seeing are real and meaningful, or if they could have just happened by random chance. When a finding is statistically significant, that's our green light to say, hey, we're pretty confident this is a real thing.
So, there you have it. We've gone on the entire research journey, from that first little idea all the way to the final analysis. We made our blueprint, we checked our ethical compass, we explored the world for data, and we made a discovery. But after all of that, we're left with one final and maybe the most important question of all. When it's all said and done and the report is written, whose story actually gets told and whose doesn't? That's something to think about.